Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Welcome everyone to an episode of Outside the Panels. I am your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes, and as the Dark Knights beckon, no, not that Dark Knight, Winter Dark Knights. Don't you find it quite funny how we have just had Halloween and already we're talking about Christmas? We haven't even hit December yet. Well, I'm on this trend as well, so I'm even bypassing Christmas. I'm talking January 2024 with Oni 24's new imprint and a writer of some regard in TV and comic books with a new series coming out, Jill and the Killers, is the fantastic Olivia Cuartero-Briggs. Olivia, how's it going?
I am very well, and I'm super excited to be talking to you. How are you?
I am very well. I can't complain. I'm starting my Christmas shopping a little bit early, so I'm ahead of the game.
I secretly, I haven't told anyone, but I've started finding things for the kids because it's just so much fun.
For Santa, Santa comes and gives you the presents. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Oh, not from Santa, from me. I want credit for the cool stuff.
Santa Smanta.
They get to ask him for it in person.
Yeah.
He brings them that one thing. I get credit for everything else. I'm sorry. I'm an only child. I'm not willing to share.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Just don't stop at all the department stops, for Christ's sake, because there's been shed loads of Santas there. All right, excellent. Olivia, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We're here to talk about your new book that's coming out next year. As I mentioned, it's on the Oni 2024 imprint. She's in the background. There you go. It's Jill. That's Jill.
She is. She's hanging out back there.
Yeah, she's just chilling out.
She's eyeing us here.
I am all right with that. You know, any attention's good attention in my book. All right, okay.
I think Jill would say the same thing. Unfortunately, yeah, she's having a bit of a rough time socially. But
definitely. I've been lucky enough to read the preview of the book, and we'll get a look at that in a little bit. But tell us, what's going on in Jill and the Killers?
So we start off with Jill Estrada, who's our central character, and she's had a bit of a tough year. Her mom, who was a cop, went missing, and her patrol car was found at the bottom of a lake. And she's kind of been under lockdown by her dad for the past year, and she's just now coming back to school. But of course, like, a year of high school is like eons. Like, everything has changed and her friend group has morphed. And so she discovers when she goes back to school that like everybody is into true crime and these, murder mystery games. And so to appease her friends and to try and get them back on her side, as it were, she orders this really popular murder mystery game. When the game arrives, however, they quickly discover that these clues are not to a game at all, but a real life, actual double homicide that happened in their hometown of Seligman, Arizona. And now they have the weighty task of solving this crime, which Jill starts to believe might be connected to what happened to her mom.
Wow.
So yeah, that's where we start the story, and I can't really tell you much more without massive spoilers. Although I can talk a lot about the characters, but yeah,
good. We'll stick that there. It always strikes me in these types of stories. I don't know if I assume no one's as old as me, but I remember a TV show called Heart to Heart. I don't know if from the early 80s, I suppose. And it's like about these two couples, there's a man and woman, they meet together, fall in love, every great. But when they met, it was murder. And every episode of this formulaic TV show is someone in their circle of friends gets, and they have to solve the crime.
Every episode?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like this episode. The idea is, I would not want to know the hearts because bad stuff happens. It's like this kind of this thing. If things are happening dodgy in Jill's town, man, I'd move.
Well, yeah, especially considering that this town does not have a very large population. In actuality, it's a very, very small town. Seligman, Arizona is a very real place. It's on Old Route 66 in
All
Arizona.
right, well,
And it seems as though when you drive through that it was like a popular little spot for people passing through on Route 66, like, back in the 50s and 60s.
I
And
don't like how you looked at me when you said 50s and 60s. Easy, Tiger.
Wait, that you specifically drove through in the 50s.
Why are you out there?
Remember that, Johnny? No, and
Hmm.
it's kind of like it's all of the nostalgia is still there, but it's really strange. It's like
Yeah.
there's these old gutted shells of vintage cars that have been brightly painted, and these fading murals of Marilyn Monroe and James Dean, and these, kind of closed down motels. But when I happened to stay in this town, I was driving cross country. There was a high school, and the high school looked like it was very much up and running, even though I hardly saw anyone around. And I was like, there are people that live here. I wonder what their lives are like in this kind of creepy, strange,
Yeah,
fascinating town.
that's a
So,
great point. Because we go places on holiday, don't we, or on vacation? We go to like these. So where I live, there's a town called Whitby. It's a seaside town, North Yorkshire. Bram Stoker allegedly wrote Dracula there.
oh, I
So
love Bram. You know that Bram Stoker Monster Hunter is still waiting to come out, right?
I did not know that.
We announced it a year ago, but everyone knows that Aftershock has had some bankruptcy issues that they
Some
are
issues.
currently sorting through.
I don't
But
understand that, because I thought Aftershock, when they kicked off, I thought they were absolutely the bee's knees. I thought the sting in the tail of the story, that was kind of their thing. And I love some of that other
they're
stuff.
known for great books, and
Yeah.
they've put out a lot of really fantastic books. And I know it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn because my
Mhm.
my first two books are with them, but no, they put out excellent work. But every publishing house has challenges. It's not an easy business. And they're sorting through everything, though. They're very diligently working through everything they have to work through to get people paid and to get things up and running, at least as far as I hear. And they've been in touch with me quite a bit. So hopefully, you mentioned Bram. I am so proud of Bram Stoker Monster Hunter. Hopefully, this is a side note, but hopefully you guys get to see it soon. It was supposed to come out this past year in February, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it can come out this year so that we can close that loop with you guys.
We'll close that coffin lid. So I suppose we go to these places and we forget, because we're too busy enjoying ourselves, that there are actually people that live there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that where the trespassers pass it into their lives. We might be bringing economy and money into their avenue, but it's us clogging up their streets and their highways and whatnot. So it's a nice, I suppose, from an outsider looking in, it's an interesting take for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was curious about this place, and also visually, it's so stunning and different. That I just thought it was a fabulous place to put a murder mystery.
Why not?
No offense to the people of Seligman.
Yeah. Your place is so great, somebody's being killed.
There's no way someone hasn't died here.
Yeah. Put that on the in the brochure. Billy Bob died here. Hey!
Yeah.
Sorry to everyone who's called Billy Bob. I apologize. True crime's a massive thing. In real life, in reality, there's you can't turn on the TV without a true crime documentary coming up, or I sometimes call them mockumentaries, because they're kind of like built on facts, right? And then not only that, the detective stories have got a lot more serious, like True Detective, for example. It's not just NYPD Blue anymore. It's very much an in-depth character piece, as much as it is about the crime and the location. It's very driven. These aspects are these kind of the things that play into Jill's story. Obviously, she's dealing with trauma, and that will get explained down the line. How do you kind of? I think it must be a balancing act, is it, to kind of invest a level of depth in characters without taking them outside of the realms of their like town folk existence, I guess.
Well, I think, in terms of, balancing the crime and the character and the town of it all, in terms of keeping them in one location respectively, I often find that helps enhance your ability to tell a character-driven story, because things are contained, so they're forced to be with the same people. And Jill she lives at home, so she has to keep coming home to her dad, and they have beef, and she's stuck there with her friends. And I think that's often why we're attracted to teen stories, right? Because they have big stakes in small circumstance, and we can all relate to that, because we were all there. We were all at one point who were stuck at home. We had to see the same people every day, and we had to confront these issues, and it forced us to grow in ways that were uncomfortable at the time, but we still romanticize, because we're always going back to our teen stories. So location, I think, helps in that regard. And then in terms of the character versus the crime of it all, you were talking about, detective shows and cop shows. And I think that we've become very accustomed, and investigative journalism, like with the podcasts, like we were used to hearing about crimes and waiting around in crimes through the perspective of someone in law enforcement, or someone with a journalistic background, someone who's one step removed and somewhat professional, right? Even though, like you say, they still have a personal journey and all of that. Because I am a true crime junkie in my own right, I have always been attracted to stories of lay people solving. We don't, if you thought that something bad happened and you wanted to figure out who did it, what resources do you have? How would you figure this out? And if push came to shove and the threat was really real in your face, which is what happens to Jill and their friends, and no one is listening to them, you have to do this. Where would you start? How would you go about it? And that's always been really fascinating to me. I love those stories. The trick was to have this investigation, to try and stay one step ahead of the reader while keeping them engaged, while telling a very, very personal, character-driven story. It's not just Jill who has a character arc here. Ginger has an arc with Jill. That's Jill's best friend and like pseudo love interest. Just before Jill's mom went missing, he and Ginger had like kind of become a couple. Like they had crossed that threshold from friendship into coupledom, but it was kind of thrashed when Jill fell off the map. And then there's another character, Clyde, who's like the new girl in the friend group and who's kind of taken over. She's like the girl that you see that you're like, oh my God, she has so much confidence. She's terrifying.
She's so cool.
She is so cool, but like Jill instinctively hates her.
Because she's too cool for school.
She isn't. She seems irreverent and like she doesn't care. But the truth of the matter is that she's dealing with something very similar to what Jill is dealing with. They're both processing grief in very, very different ways. And so Jill's is very much an emotional story of, accepting that things have changed, and accepting the fact, and again, I don't want to get ahead of the story.
Yeah.
A lot of acceptance that has to come with what happened to her mother, and how Jill kind of grows into that.
Cool.
So what I like to do, and because writing for me in terms of the craft of it, it's just as emotional as it is like putting together a puzzle. And this was really a puzzle. I mean, it took up an entire, I have a magnetic wall in my office that it was just covered in cards trying to track this investigation. And once I had the basic beats of who finds out what, when, and how this is the next thing, then not only was I layering in the beats of Jill's emotional journey, but I wanted to connect those emotional beats directly to what was happening in the investigation as much as possible, so that finding a new clue or being in a certain circumstance that the case put her in was triggering something that was then moving her emotional journey along as well. So the two are interconnected. So, and I think that's really what you want out of your drama.
Definitely.
Like, it took this journey to have this realization, and it couldn't have happened any other way.
Cool. That's a lot of plates. That is a lot of plates.
But that's the fun of this. That's the fun. People find it very overwhelming when you talk about it this way, but like there's baby steps. You know, if you're someone who's out there and who wants to write things like this, like don't be overwhelmed, because you can take baby steps first, right? Give your characters names, then decide what their, you know, character types are like. Then with the investigation, like figure out who your perp is, work backwards, give them an MO. Like there's little baby steps to all of this. It's just, you know, when it all comes together, it looks like this crazy mosaic. How would you put that together? Well, it took a lot of time and patience and little moves, and
It's
those
like,
are all possible.
It's like Columbo, the TV show. You see the crime, you see who does it, and then you watch Columbo go through the stages to solve the damn thing.
Yes.
Like working backwards, because you already know. Shh, don't tell anyone.
You just get to see how he figures it out. Yeah.
And where the readers running along with Jill. Teen drama is massively popular. When I started flicking through the book, two kind of influences sprung out to me, and I apologize for these. One, Nancy Drew.
Okay, yeah.
Both the original and the, I suppose, TV show to an extent. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And it's got absolutely nothing to do with vampires. But when we talk about teen social groups, there's two shows for me, Buffy and Smallville.
Okay.
And Buffy, you've got the female protagonist. You've got those kind of relationships with the kind of characters that like her, the kind of characters that don't like her, the characters she doesn't like, but very much like Jill's, it's sequestered in a compact area where you have to bounce off the walls. You have to bounce off the walls of Sunnydale, for example, before things, you know, before they graduate and go to college and so on and whatever. Is that a good spot, or is it kind of, am I just talking out my hat? You can say I'm talking out my hat. It's fine.
I mean, I will say that, I'm sorry, it was Buffy and Nancy Drew. Nancy Drew, I will say that neither of those were necessarily direct influences. Nancy Drew, though, I mean, I read Nancy Drew books as a kid, and there was something extremely compelling about a young woman going out and solving crimes. That was very alluring, and it was very different, because I think we are very used to seeing these types of stories being told either from one boy or groups of boys.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned that. When I was a kid, if I read some of the Hardy Boy books, but they were boring. I'm one of the ones with Nancy in. It's the same when I watched the Batman TV show, the 60s show. I used to watch it with my grandfather, and we'd watch, and we'd be like waiting for the Bat cycle to go on with Batgirl, and we'd look at it and say, Batgirl's in it, yes! You know, so there is something that everyone likes seeing the female protagonist.
Well, that's good to know that also from, you know, a male viewer, that it's exciting to see women in these types of roles, because I know that growing up, you know, I used to have like Olivia Saves the World fantasies all the time as a kid. So when I would see young women taking up that mantle and that role, it was very, very exciting for me. So Nancy Drew, in terms of just what she was influential, and I wanted to pick that up because I enjoyed those books as a kid. Not so much in terms of the tone or any of that. Buffy was not an influence, but I love that you said that, and I'm incredibly flattered. It's an incredibly iconic and well-crafted show, which was very well written, and but what I think is so special about it was that it had a powerful female lead who absolutely went on an emotional journey and a lot of growth, and she had to come into her power in a very unique way that Jill also has to. But it was suspenseful, and it drew you in, and it was funny. Yeah. And that this is I've always loved the horror comedy genre. I think it's incredibly special. I think if you're laughing 1 minute, it's so much easier to hear you, because you can catch people off guard. It makes the horror palatable in some ways.
Yeah.
But it also it for me it feels more real. It's so hard for me, and I don't know if it's because I've gotten older or that we've all been through a pandemic or whatever.
That's
But
true.
when I watch these heavy either like horror films or dramas of like, you know, the late 90s and, you know, early 2000s, I'm like, how did we get through this stuff? It's so heavy.
Yeah.
And there's no, it's like, do people really conduct themselves in their lives like this, where there's no smiling, not even a chuckle? I mean, I find like survival for me is based on being able to laugh at myself. And so that was something that was really, really important for me to give Jill. When Jill is in pain, she jokes until she can't anymore. But her father even calls her out on it right at the beginning in those early pages.
I read that, yeah, definitely.
Masking her pain with humor. You're not ready to go back to school. And she's like, no, I'm going.
No, you said Thanksgiving and I'm going after Thanksgiving. That's the rules.
So, so the Buffy comparison is incredibly flattering, makes me very, very happy. I will say that, you know, other like major influences, like I loved the Scream movies. So like, so tonally, we're very much in that area where it's like real stuff is happening. There are real criminals out there. People are really dying. But at the same time, you have this group of teens. They have their own dynamics. And Jill's very funny and very, very candid and very raw. So you will have those jokes, and there's strange people in town, and they're not going to go unnoticed, you know? So there is all of that. But I will say that like the biggest influence for me, honestly, was that when I was growing up, I loved movies like Stand By Me, and I loved, you know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I loved Lord of the Flies, that book. I read it cover to cover. There were always these like coming of age stories involving boys. And like, like Monster Squad and Goonies, like all of these, right? Like maybe a token female, but for the most part, it was like boys solving a problem or solving a mystery. And I loved them, but you know, then I would I would always tell myself, okay, like before I go to bed, I'm going to think about this. And so I like think about these movies, always trying to find places to fit myself. And either I would have to take a boy's part, which I didn't really want, or I'd have to like construct a place for myself to fit. And it always felt disingenuous. And so I thought, you know, I really want to make something for everyone, but also so that girls don't have to work so hard to put themselves in the stories. And so Jill is my gift in that regard, and also to my girls as well, because one of them is old enough for this, the other one is younger, but I feel like they'll appreciate it somewhere down the line.
Excellent. It's the right time for it, you know. Definitely. I think with the influx of how certain media are now portraying strong female characters, whether that be the Black Widow holding her own in the Avengers, and any other show where there's that strong female lead, you know, now's the time to get these characters out there and say, look, you know, this is what I was saying on the pod not so long ago. To me, equality isn't about pushing one over the other. That's not equality. This is equality, where everyone's on the same level, right? And that's kind of how I view it. I don't understand why people don't gravitate more to female characters. It's like I was talking to my wife and I was saying to myself,
I think what we're finding is that they make money.
Well, yeah, but I said to my wife when we were kids, that's all right, because my wife's a similar age to me. I said, "Oh, do you watch Thundercats?" She was like, "No, I've not seen Thundercats." Did you watch He-Man? No, I didn't watch He-Man. Did you watch She-Ra? She was like, "No, I didn't watch She-Ra." I'm like, "Well, She-Ra's made for you. Why didn't you read She-Ra? What's going on?" She's like, "Oh, I just didn't." And I just think there's so many, I suppose, women who've then grown up into this ancillary role or this ancillary style of thinking. And it's not like that. Everyone has a place. Everyone has a place. That's why, to me, you know, when I was a kid, characters like Batgirl were massively important. You know, in fact, if truth be told, Olivia, I got into Batman because of Batgirl. I didn't particularly care. Batman used to scare the pants out of me when I was a kid. Batgirl, on the other hand, she's accessible. You know, so and that's how I got into comic books.
Well, there's a reason for both of those things. Right.
Don't tell me it's puberty.
I'm gonna ruin this a little bit for you.
Don't ruin it.
You already know this. I mean, the reason why you were attracted to characters like Batgirl, and that a lot of, boys and young men, and probably even middle-aged men, were drawn in by these, comic book heroines, is because they were made for you.
No, so no.
Hang on. They were. These comic books were written and drawn by men, for the demographic, which was men. And this doesn't make them bad. No one's saying these people are bad. Most of the readers of comic books were male. And so they were trying to appeal to their audience. That's what we do as creators. We know that people are watching. We love our fans. We want to make things for our fans. They didn't do anything wrong by constructing female characters that would appeal to men, but that's what they did. And we can look at it just like what you're saying, equality means we're on the level. We're not pushing anybody down. No one's saying, I mean, sure, could they have been short-sighted in some of the creations of these characters? Absolutely. Yes. But nobody did that with a bad intent.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't. And no one meant to alienate women from comic books, I don't believe. But I will tell you that growing up, when I went to the comic book shop and I saw Batgirl with huge tits on the cover of these comic books, I thought, like your wife thought when she saw She-Ra, that's not for me. We knew that wasn't for us. There was something that told us that's not for us. This is not an example of who we can be. Ripplingly muscular, also with massive boobs and a tiny waist, and with this man next to her. You knew as a young girl looking at those that was not for me. Those representations of women were not for me. What was for me, I thought, was Archie. Betty and Veronica, right? Also written by men.
Oh my God.
That's what I read growing up. So that's, listen, no one's.
No. I just kind of, I'm interested in this.
Is something that is important for me, and I know a lot of female creators, and we are still very underrepresented in comics.
Agreed.
Again, nobody's fault. People just do what they're used to. But a lot of the comic book companies, they're on this. They're in it. They're changing the landscape. There's a lot of female editors. Is that we've got to start, creating content for women and everyone.
For everyone,
right?
Yes,
for just that anyone can identify with, but importantly, so that women can look at the cover and say, like, oh, that's for me. That chick is for me. And that's why even this image that you have behind here, there was the first sketch that I got of her. She had a tank top on and boobs and a cleavage, and I said, no, you got to get rid of that. Put her in a t-shirt. She has tiny boobs. She's basically flat chested. Like, get rid of all of that.
Yeah.
And she's also, if you haven't noticed, she's Latina, and she's one of 3 of my leads are Latinas.
It's important.
And of like various mixtures. So Ginger's Afro-Latina. Jill's dad is Mexican, and then Clyde is also mixed.
It's massively important that the diversity is recognized in comic books. For me, definitely, I would say, and I've said this before as well, if you've got diverse characters, you've got to make them interesting characters. Otherwise, the diversity becomes the lead part, not the character part. And I've read Jill, and I thought it was great. So there you go. For my own defense, my first wife, she used to love Francine Pascal's Sweet Valley High books.
Oh, yes.
I've read a shed load of those. All right. The twins, one of them fancies Jeff, he moves off, another one plays soccer, and so I like to think that I'm quite a well-rounded individual. I'm not just all about the cleavage. Thank you very much.
But listen, we can be about that too. And listen, there is nothing to defend. I think that it's very important now that we all come from a place of no one has anything to answer for. It's about what we do now, right? It makes me crazy when we look at people's behavior in the 90s and even the 2000s through a 2023 lens.
You're speaking my language. You are absolutely speaking my language.
It's judgmental, and it's sometimes I find it's very negative, and what we need to be doing as much as possible is to be having open conversations
Mhm.
about where we are and what we want, with extending understanding to people that may not understand us and where we come from, and our point of views. And I think that, I mean, you're not American, and I'm envious. It's a hard time to be an American because we are so fractured in this way, and no one's listening to each other anymore. And that's why I say you have nothing to feel bad about, whether you've read Sweet Valley High or not, or whether
I love Sweet Valley High.
like, Dynamite covers or not. That you have nothing to feel bad about. You like what you like.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that, so for women, sometimes those covers can be alienating. That's
I
it.
agree. I
But
agree. I
out
tell
there,
you,
okay? You don't have
every time I try and watch anime, because everyone tells me anime is the next best thing. Every time I put anime on Netflix, my wife looks at me and goes, "Why is he always wearing short skirts and thigh-high stockings?" And I'm like, "I have no idea. I couldn't tell you. It's like I don't get it. I don't understand it.
I could tell you.
I know why you do it, but it's like to me, it doesn't add to the story. And hey, I like short skirts and thigh highs, but that's a different story altogether. All right, time for a quick break before we have a look at your book. Where shall we go? I tell you what, we've talked about looking at all the things through all the times through a modern lens. Check out this. It's the Old Timers.
Do you want to find out what makes a professor do his happy dance? Check out the Old Timers Comic Book Show, only on the UCPN.
There you go. The Old Timers Comic Book Show, where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. Yeah, you have to be 25 or older to make that show. Comic book wise. Okay. We've got her in the background. Time to bring her to the foreground. Check it out. Here we go. This is the cover of Jill and the Killers #1. First off, I have to say, Roberta, I can't say her surname, so I apologize right now. Roberta Ingrancia. Is that right?
I have always pronounced it Roberta Ingranata. I think that's right.
That'll do. That'll do. How do you manage to get Roberta? Because I saw her work on Witchblade, and for the this is prime. This leads into what you were saying before the break. The first issue of when I looked at the Roberta Granata book, I was waiting for like the Witchblade that I knew to come forward from the curves and everything. Second issue, when it didn't happen, I was like, this is a different thing. And then that's when I finally got it, and I was like, right, I'm reading it, and it was absolutely gorgeous. The art on the book was fantabulous, better than the curves, the previous version for me, definitely. So how do you manage to get such a cool artist to work on your book?
Well, first off, we should say that this cover is actually Sanya Anwar. So this is an incentive cover. This is not Roberta's handiwork.
I apologize.
No. I just wanted to make sure that like the artist is getting credit for what we're looking at. But yes, Roberta absolutely did my interiors. Now she and I had worked together on my previous book, my first solo series, which was Silver City. She did my covers for that book, so I knew her work. And then it was a stroke of magic. Obviously the book had been greenlit by Oni. It was a combined contract with me and an artist, so we were waiting for someone to come on so we could kind of complete everything. And because Oni's great about like right sharing with artists and the writers. And when they were like, "Oh, well, do you know Roberta Ingranata? She's available." I was like, "Oh my God, yes!" I knew her. I knew her work. I knew her work ethic, and she and I have had a really incredible time on this book. I mean, not only is her work stellar, like she's got an amazing work ethic. I've gotten to know her as a person. There are, there's an incredible amount of solidarity that I feel with her in this book, and it's made the book so much more special to me because of the relationship that I have formed with her. And she is definitely one of the. We will be working again on something else very soon. I know it. But yeah, I mean, if you look at some of these interiors, it's really with Roberta, it's the emotion that she is able to convey with these characters. And there's some great fight scenes later on, especially between Jill and her father, where it's just like it rips your heart out. And yeah, so she's I honestly I don't know how they got her. I'm just so glad that they did.
And it's really vitally important because yes, it's a true crime mystery problem, but it's also the trauma impact on Jill, and not just on Jill, but how that bleeds into her relationship with her father, relationship with her friends. She's time displaced out of high school, all these things. So you've got a lot of emotion on there, and you need an artist who can convey that. Otherwise, what's the point of writing the words, right?
Yes, no, 100%. I mean, look, not all books necessitate that much emotion, but I think, like you said, when you're dealing with teenagers, you need it.
Yeah.
And oh, this is something really special. Okay, so we see O'Brien here. If you go back to the previous one,
That one.
Yeah, so these three images at the top here, this is our character Cher, who's taking a picture of her boyfriend. She's very in love with, and this is O'Brien. So this character, he was always in the book, but when I started writing the book, I had recently started seeing this new guy who I was very, very into, whose name is Chris O'Brien. And I said, can I name this character after you? And he said, of course. And I said, well, can I get some pictures of you when you were in high school so that he can look like you?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Then I got his high school pictures and I was like, oh my God, you've really changed.
In a good way, I hope, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
That's what you mean. That's what you mean, right?
No, it's funny. Like I say that I went through an awkward stage. He went through an awkward stage. But no, it's very
Oh, I hope he doesn't watch this.
So, he will. But so I sent her pictures of Chris, and it's interesting. She really captured his likeness. She made him much less awkward than he was back then. He's quite handsome here, but it really does look like him.
I can't believe you said that. Took away his awkwardness. He's really quite handsome, as if that's a shock. You're telling me?
No, he's very handsome now. He was just a very awkward teenager. But
oh man, we were all awkward back then, man. We were all awkward. That's what made us cool.
It's true. It's true. But so what was so interesting though is that she didn't see any pictures of him as an adult. I just sent her these pictures of him as a teenager, and the rendition actually it's like it looks a lot more like him as an adult, but obviously a younger version, like sans facial hair and stuff. But I was so impressed with how she captured him. So that's a little Easter egg for fans of the book. That's an actual guy. And he actually does have a fear of spiders.
And that's your guy, right? That's what you're saying. That's not just a guy. That's your guy.
That's my guy. Yep, that's my guy. Cher and I share a guy. No pun intended.
So basically, then, if something untoward happens to him later down the line, is that going to be reflective?
Oh, it might be. Yes, I have. It's like my version of a voodoo doll, right? This is how I get to abuse him. And
yeah, it's like bring me breakfast in bed, or you're dead by issue 3.
Oh, just wait.
Oh, great! Now I'm going to be in the book. Fantastic. Yeah, Sark English teacher joins the school. Hey. I am not sending you pictures.
All right. I can find him on the internet.
Right, yeah, you can. Just look for me. I'm all over the place there. Let me talk about something a little bit serious about the kind of journey that Jill's going through.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what it's like stateside. Over here, the biggest group at risk of committing suicide are men between 35 and 55. Predominantly, that's because as society has evolved to be more open-minded of mental health, men of that generation aren't aware how to convey their feelings, and they were brought up to laugh, and the world laughs with you, cry, give you something to cry about, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Trauma on anyone can lead to some pretty dark places. How vital was it for you to represent that? I was going to say the word ethically, but that's not the word I mean. Realistically, for Jill and for the people who potentially pick up this book and might have gone through their own mental health struggles.
I would say.
Oh, that's a deep question, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, there's a
Sorry.
lot to unpack there. I think that the importance of conveying emotions honestly is always high, whether you're constructing a comedy, a thriller, a horror, or a drama. For storytellers, that's something that we really want to get right. That said, that there are a lot of different ways that people manifest various types of trauma. For this book specifically, we are dealing with the trauma of loss and grief, and like I said, it's a big theme because not only is Jill dealing with it, but so is Clyde, and in very different ways. And without getting too much into the type of loss that Clyde is dealing with, this whole story, this first arc, it has a little bit of fun with the killer and the investigation, but what this is leading to, and hopefully I get to write lots more of these books, is something very real that is happening in this country, and I think other countries as well. Just because it's not the 1970s anymore does not mean that there are not still prolific serial killers. There are. They have just had to change and grow with the time, as many have, and and they exist a lot more in the shadows, and they prey on much more vulnerable people than they did before. And those vulnerable people are not always recognized by law enforcement as being important enough to pursue their cases, which is why I think you see how long it took to catch the Long Island serial killer, right? Because the women that were were well, for the people out there that it's one example of many. The women.
Well, we had the Yorkshire Ripper back in the 70s and 80s.
Right. Okay. Oh, yeah. You guys are doing much better than we are. Jesus. But when you go after marginalized groups, there's not as much of an importance placed on finding their killer.
Yeah.
So that and on top of that, what we have that people believe might be happening is that not all of the, while these killers might be acting alone, they are not unaware of each other. And that is something that was kind of new and really, really interesting for me, and something that's really happening. So combine those two things. And again, it's like, there's so much I can't say, but I really wanted to, with this series of books, to be able to talk not just about those marginalized communities that are not being protected the way they should, but the amount of pain and grief that their families go through, not just losing someone, but not having any idea what happened to them. And not being able to get that sense of closure or justice or forgiveness or whatever.
It leads into the 5 stages, right? If once, because the 5 stages are denial, anger, acceptance, bargaining's in there somewhere along the line. That's how we are psychologically attuned to try and get through a loss, whether that be a loss of someone dying, a loss of a marriage, a loss of a pet, whatever it might be. We go through that kind of chart where we start here, we hit our yes, I'm fine, and then you drop down into the next valley of step before you climb out of that, to then by the time you finish, you've gone through the 5 valleys. the problem
And
we've
then you
got
might have
is
to go back and repeat some.
yes,
That's
exactly right. Sometimes sometimes you get to this one, and then we end up, instead of going forward, we'll end up going backwards again, or there's no rhyme or reason to the order. This is quite important because you might have a character who is becoming accepted to the loss of someone, but just because they're accepting it doesn't mean that everybody's in the same zone, the same feeling. And then that in itself creates a level of tension, because it's kind of like, why don't you still care? Because you've accepted that that person's gone, or that thing's gone, or whatever.
And that's exactly what Jill's dealing with her dad, right?
Right.
Is that they're on very different pages in terms of where they are in their grief. And yeah, I think, for Jill and for Clyde and, Ginger has also experienced loss. It's a different kind of loss, but she lost a limb. And that's pretty significant too. All of this, how we actually get to acceptance, the messy road there. We have a lot of characters that are traveling on their different journeys. And I think, for me, and part of the reason why I chose this when I did is, I think that the pandemic we all lost a lot, whether we lost people or our freedom or our jobs, or our way of life. The pandemic took a lot from us. And I think a lot of us lost all of those things, right? We lost people that we loved.
Self-identity. The
Yes.
amount of people in my day job who are defined by what they do for a living, who have now lost that living because of the pandemic. And I can see their self-esteem just go like this, because that's it. To them, it is like, it's like the kid show. I don't know if you guys had it over there, Bob the Builder. Bob, his name's Bob, and he's a builder. You take that away from him, and he's just Bob.
Yeah,
and that's what people are dealing with, right?
My dad is a theatrical carpenter, and his name is Bob. So
hey,
with Bob the Builder.
Bob is a builder,
right? And these are all different types of grief and loss. And when I thought about thematically, because I always want to tackle something that I am processing myself, and I realized, I lost my grandfather and an uncle during that time. I lost 2 uncles during that. Listen, these things, this is part of life. My grandfather was quite old, and it was really interesting because it was the kind of death from COVID that I don't think that we think about as much. He didn't contract COVID, but he was in an assisted living facility at the time, and he had all of these friends, and he had gotten this new lease on life in his 80s. And then suddenly he was separated from everyone, and he was isolated, and it was hard on the facility. They didn't make sure that he had, access like Zoom calls or anything.
Yeah.
And he lost his sanity in isolation because of COVID. Again, like it's these things happen. It's just it's another type of, again, that was his grief, right? Then, and it killed him eventually. I mean, again, he was like 91. But at the same time, like, he could have gotten a few more years left had the pandemic not happened. So dealing with grief in the moment when I was first, conceiving of the character and what I wanted her to be going through emotionally. This was after the book had been greenlit. And finding that linchpin for myself so that I could go on a cathartic journey with these characters, which is what I always try and do. That's what this one ended up being. So again, it's always hard with these types of themes because you want to do justice to the way that people feel and you want them to be able to connect. But the grief that these characters are dealing with, it's very specific too. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to speak to all types of grief and loss. I'm not.
No, I get that.
But this, hopefully you see, hopefully that readers see a lot of themselves in these characters. I've put a lot of myself into them.
and your relationship as well, it seems. All right, okay. My last shout before we call it, because we've overrun just a tad, and I don't mind because
I know I talk too much.
No, at all. It's been fantastic. I love talking to you. It's great. We want to give credit where credit's due, and the stuff you sent over, I had a look through, and I saw this cover, and I just had to show it because I think it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's that one.
Oh yes. Marguerite.
Yes. Now, I first saw her work on Insects for Aftershock. And I just look at this, just how, that screams exactly what this book is. It's just perfect. What a great cover.
Yeah, and I love the starred eyelashes too. There's like this like 60s vibe about it, but at the same time it's still very modern. No, it's an absolutely beautiful cover, and I remember when I first saw her concept, I was like, I don't have any notes. Like this looks amazing.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. We will say for the record that when we looked at the book is still a work in progress.
Yes.
So when it comes out, the book will have colors by who's your colorist?
Well, we actually, I don't really know how to credit this at this point in time because we're working with two colorists at the moment. But is it Nolte?
I believe it is. Yes.
Yes. So Nolte, Nolte has started us off. And again, I think there's stuff going on the art side. So when we finally see the final product, I'll have a little bit more to communicate on that end.
Cool.
But yes, so we're getting that ironed out, and it's all looking really, really, really beautiful.
Cool. Excellent. I can't wait to see the finished version. Excellent.
Same.
Olivia, give me a 60-second pitch of why people should be checking out this book after the new year.
Jill and the Killers is a really, really fun ride. It's a throwback to the kind of stories that I loved growing up with an all-female cast. That is, it's a love note to the stories that you loved that were filled with male characters solving crimes, but it's also like kind of an FU because it's all chicks. And it's a damsel in distress. We have a dude in distress, and I'm super, super proud of it. Hope it's going to scare you and make you laugh, and I hope make your heart bleed a little bit too, because I love Jill so much. I love her so much, and I am so excited to share her with you.
Cool. If you want to keep up to date with Olivia and of course Jill, you can follow over on Twitter. Yes, I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm not calling it X, no matter what anybody says, unless Elon starts paying me some tributes. I ain't paying. I'm not saying no. Twitter, always, and Insta. Look at me. I'm done with the kids. Insta. The links there. All right, and we'll run that in the bio underneath the trail. Will be beneath the show. Olivia, it's been an absolute blast.
Yes, thank you so much, Johnny. This was so much fun. We'll have to do this again soon. Well,
the door is always open. When you are ready for your advanced review of your book, you know where to send it.
Ooh.
And I'll make sure that gets done for you. Yeah.
Review, so good.
Well, you won't be worried about reviews, surely.
I try not to read them.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's 600 words I don't need to write. Then excellent job. That's easy done. Right.
I'll read your.
Son of a. All right. Excellent. Olivia, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for spending time. I look forward to seeing the book. I am really intrigued. So I'm very interested to see how this goes. Well done.
Oh, yay. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. That's it for another show. Don't forget to check out the UCPM for all your favorite shows. Saw the trailer for it earlier, the Old Timers Comic Book Show. And if you like your comics a Marvel style, don't forget to check out the No Price podcast for everything that is Disney Plus MCU. Yes, that includes the new Marvel movie. And of course, the Marvel comics do make an appearance. And of course, you've got the Definitive Crusade for all you DC fans out there as well. Olivia, one more time, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have been your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. And as always, adios.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.com, all about comic pop culture.